Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we'll be doing some more to the XR311 body. Not sure if we're going to finish it, so let's see how far we can get. The first major bit we're going to fit is the heel board, the bit that runs right across the body. We need to get this in nice and square. There's some points moulded in to help align it, but the most important bit requires the engine cover to be fitted. The heel board has a lip that ends up being a mounting point for the cover, so we need to make it perfectly aligned or things just won't fit. With the cover in place but not glued, hold the heel board in place at one end and tack it down with some plasti weld, just a single drop, and let it harden. Very carefully do the same at the other end, making sure you don't disturb anything. You've got a few seconds now where you can double check everything. If it all looks good, you can let it harden completely. Once it's nice and solid, you can go around and stick the rest of the seams together. At the front we've got a fuel filler cap, a neat little workaround to make the body mould easier to do. The cap is a loose fit in the hole, so we'll need to centre it up. All we need to do is put a drop of plasti weld, which will wick around nicely. After a couple of seconds held in place, we can flip the body over and carefully centre the cap. Simple. Dashboard next. It's made up of 3 bits which we can attach to the body. They have some nice little slots to fit into, so alignment is nice and straightforward. A couple of drops of plasti weld and we're done. I've not stuck the panel with the gauges in though. I'm hoping when the floor goes in we'll be able to remove it to make it easier to paint and detail. While all that goes off, we can cut the interior parts from the trees. The steering wheel and extinguisher will need priming with some plastic primer and painting. I'll do that off camera, as my attempts at painting small items at arm's reach with a camera in front of my face have never gone well in the past. The seats are made up from quite a few bits, neat separate frames and cushions. The frames are sided, so keep track of which is which. Other than that, the main bits need sticking together, frames to the cushions and the 2 halves of the backs. There's no point in trying to get the seams perfectly welded. They're not structural, so they just need to be good enough that they're not going to fall apart. That'll all need priming and painting before getting mounted to the body, and while they're getting done we might as well do the transfer box and gearbox knobs, wipers and a couple of the other bits too. Right then, the floor pan. Before we fit we'll need to install the body mounts. There's 2 small brass flanged widgets and 2 dome-headed M2 screws. The screws go in from the inside and the brass bits just thread on. They'll need a tiny bit of Loctite, being very careful not to get any on the plastic. They only need to be done up snug to the plastic, then just a little bit more. Too much and the plastic will end up cracking. Tamiya also supply you with a neat little throttle pedal, which is nice, but it's going to restrict the driver's position, generally get in the way, and I reckon you're not going to be able to see it anyway, so I'm going to leave it off. The floor pan fits to the body quite easily. The locating pins are different sizes front and back, and surprisingly it will actually very nearly fit if you try and fit it in backwards. So as long as the pins fit properly you should be fine. Before we stick it in, I want to make sure the bit of the dash with the gauges can comfortably be fitted with the floor pan in place. It's a bit of a fiddle to get in, but it does go. That will make it a lot easier to paint before it all gets fitted. Jiggle the floor pan until it's perfectly positioned and start dropping plasti weld along the sills. When it's hardened up it will be strong enough that you can stick the rest of the seams together without worrying too much about the alignment. It's tempting to start with the tabs, but these do very little to hold the body straight. Most of the strength is in the sills, much like a real car body. Next we've got these little flanges. Not sure what they're supposed to do. Don't think they're a jacking point, as they'd be far too vulnerable to damage while driving. Maybe they're strapping points for when the truck's on a flatbed transport. Anybody got any ideas? Anyway, they can get stuck on with a nice spot of plasti weld. Once it's hardened, if they do get a smack, the exposed end will break off rather than the whole piece coming away from the body, so at least the damage will look realistic. Engine cover now. It should just drop into place since we've carefully made sure it was a good fit earlier. It'll need a few spots of plasti weld where it meets the top of the heel board panel and a couple of spots along the outer edge. And then, by the magic of video, we end up with a nicely painted body. Make sure any of the glues and the plasti weld are 100% gone off before painting, then a couple of thin coats of plastic primer followed by the top coat. I've used the same paint I used on the Cross RC MC8, the camo green matte paint from Halfords. It's not the cheapest, but it does seem to be rather resilient to knocks and bumps. Before we fit the detail bits, we're going to paint the console with some matte black. I'm using rubber black, which is going to be close enough. There we go, much better. Now we can fit the transfer box and the gearbox knobs. They just need a drop of plasti weld in the holes and the knobs inserting. They'll be a bit delicate until it's hardened, so be careful not to knock them. The fire extinguisher has a bar that it fits over, a little bit of plasti weld on the sides, and it just fits over the top. Notice the not very deliberate mistake, which magically fixes itself between the edits. I've painted the seats in anti-skid mark brown as per the manual. I think Tamiya call it earth brown. They just need a drop of plasti weld in the mounting holes and the seats just drop straight in. The driver's seat has a bit of a strange layout, but I guess that's so the driver fits in nicely. Like the gear knobs, it'll be a little bit vulnerable to getting knocked while the plasti weld hardens, so it would be a good idea to leave it for an hour or so before moving on. Here's the instrument panel, painted in the same green as the rest of the body and the dials detailed. It's a bit basic looking, but it'll do the job nicely. I've not fitted the steering wheel yet. It's quite a loose fit, which makes it easier to get in the right position for the driver's hands when we get to it. The panel should drop straight in, lining up with the bits we fitted earlier. When it's in just the right spot, we can drop some plasti weld in. Much easier than trying to detail it when it's already fitted. Planning ahead for the win, as they say, or as I say. Driver next, but as I'm sure you can guess, we're going to have to wait until next week. We've made quite a lot of progress today though, nearly done. Anyway, thanks for watching, like if you liked, and if you're not already, do please subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Bye guys.